Okay, welcome everyone to our discussion on 1099s today. I have with me today our crowd favorite Brad Martin and Jason Jenison from Nelco Solutions. Jason is an expert on 1099s and he is here to share with us what a 1099 is, who needs to file a 1099, and then some 1099 filing deadlines. We partner with Nelco Solutions to provide easy ordering of the 1099 forms. So if you haven't ordered yours yet, please let us know. After Jason speaks, I will then have Brad demonstrate how to print out 1099s in Design Manager. So let's get right into it. And here is Jason from Nelco.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk to all the Design Manager users regarding 1099s. As Lindsay mentioned, I am Jason from Nelco. You may have heard of Nelco. We specialize in year-end reporting. You may also know that you get some of your checks that are compatible with Design Manager software from us as well. You guys probably think about 1099 reporting maybe for a month or two out of the year, hopefully only a week or two. However, here at Nelco, we think about year-end reporting year-round. 12 months out of the year, we're constantly thinking about how we can make sure that our services and our products are compatible with our partner software, they're compatible with the IRS, and we're disseminating as much information as we can regarding 1099 filing. That's why I'm so excited to have this opportunity to talk to you guys about 1099s. I know they're not always the most exciting thing in the world, but we'll do our best to make them simple so that way you guys can get them done and get on your way. So let's just start with what is a Form 1099. A Form 1099 is used to report a number of different types of information, including taxable income, to the Internal Revenue Service. So most of the time when you think about a 1099, you're thinking about the dollars that are sent around on it. However, there is other information that is often sent on a 1099. Usually, though, you're looking at reporting income. And depending on the type of information that's being reported, there is a specific 1099 that's required. For example, if you receive a distribution from a pension or an annuity, you'll receive a 1099-R. If you have an interest-bearing account with, say, a bank or a credit union, you'll get a 1099-INT. If you own stock and you receive a dividend distribution from that stock, you'll get a 1099-DIV. The 1099 Miscellaneous is a little bit of a catch-all form for the IRS, and so it has a lot of different boxes on the field that may not be appropriate to your specific filing that are going to end up being left blank, because it is, like they said, a miscellaneous form. So it is kind of a catch-all for any income that needs to be reported, and we'll talk a little bit about who needs to file that in just a second. But the form, it is a catch-all form to, again, report any income that is reported, needs to be reported to the IRS, and doesn't fall into any of the other categories. So let's just start. Who needs to file a 1099? And a Form 1099 Miscellaneous must be filed by any individual or entity that has paid out $600 or more in rents or services performed for a trade or business by people not treated as its employees. This is really a key thing to remember. Your employees, you report that your payments to them on Form W-2. It's a common form. Everybody gets them from their employers. However, if you have somebody who is doing work for you and you pay income that's $600 or more, you need to send them a Form 1099 Miscellaneous if they're not your employee. The IRS still wants to know that you paid them an income, and they do need to report that income, and that's what the 1099 Miscellaneous does. A couple of quick things in here to remember. It's services performed for a trade or a business. If I have somebody come in and paint my living room and I pay that person more than $600, I don't have to file a Form 1099 for them. That is not done in the course of my trade or business. That is my personal use. So I don't need to file a 1099 Miscellaneous for them. However, if it is part of my business that happens, I do need to file a 1099 for them. I know that area can get a little bit gray, and so if there are kind of specific questions about whether a form needs to be filed or not, you can err on the side of caution and send that 1099 Miscellaneous, or you can also consult an accountant. There are also a couple other situations where 1099 Miscellaneous might be appropriate that are a little less common. If you've paid at least $10 in royalties or broker payments in lieu of dividends or tax-exempt interest, or if you've withheld federal income tax under backup withholding rules. Those are some really specific instances that we're not going to get into, but just know that they're there, so if they apply, make sure to check those out. So when don't you need to file a 1099? So of course, you don't need to file if the amount paid is less than $600. $600 is that threshold. And so if you get next year, if you want to look at how much you're paying somebody and you want to make sure to keep it under $600 to make sure you don't have to file a Form 1099 miscellaneous for them, that is the number that you need to be under to not file a 1099 miscellaneous. If it's $600 or more, you need to send that 1099. If the payment is made to a corporation, this is a really important one. If it is not a way to report income that you send to a corporation, it's only a way to report income that is sent to individuals. So if I have somebody that does a vendor work for me, and the person is working for a C Corp or an S Corp, or certain LLCs, most LLCs you still need to send a 1099 for, but certain LLCs, you would not send them a 1099 miscellaneous simply because you do not send these forms to corporations. However, if it is an individual doing work, or if it is an LLC that has not filed the appropriate paperwork to be taxed as an S Corp or a C Corp, you do need to make sure to file those forms to that individual. If the payment is made for purchases of goods instead of services, so example, if you hire somebody, for example, to come in and paint your office, and you pay them more than $600 and they're not a C corporation, you do need to file 1099 miscellaneous for them. If you go to Home Depot and you buy $600 worth of painting supplies, you do not need to file 1099 miscellaneous to Home Depot. You are simply buying paint at that point, not contracting someone with a service. So I really want to make sure that's clear that you don't need to file a 1099 if the payment is made to a corporation or if you're purchasing goods and not their services. Again, this is a form of income that is done by somebody other than your employees. So the big question is, do I have to? And if you fail to file a correct 1099 by the due date and you can't show reasonable cause, you may be subject to a penalty, right? This is the thing that everybody gets nervous about, Irs penalties, right? Penalties apply for failing to file on time. That's a big one, and we'll talk about the filing deadlines here in just a second. Failing to include all the required information, so if you leave some information that is on there that is blank, that needs to be filled out, you may face a penalty. Or if you fail to meet electronic filing requirements, we'll talk about electronic filing requirements in just a second. Or if you fail to file compliant paper forms. If the forms you file for the IRS are not correct, and Nelco has you covered on that, by the way, but if they are not correct, you can be subject to a fine. Or failing to include information that is correct. If you deliberately withhold information, there are some pretty stiff fines associated with that. How much that penalty is based on when you fix that 1099 and correct it and get it filed. So it's $50 per form if it's filed correctly within 30 days of the due date. We'll talk about due dates again in a second, but if it's 30 days within there, $50 per form, max penalty of $532,000 or $186 for small businesses. If you file correctly more than 30 days, but before August 1st, the maximum penalty is $1,596,000, roughly $1.6 million, $532,000 for small businesses, $100 per form that was not filed correctly. If you file after August 1st or you don't file at all, $260 per form, maximum penalty of roughly $3.2 million or just over $1 million for small businesses. The last one here is a kicker. If failure to file a correct information return is due to intentional disregard or not meeting correct information requirements, the penalty is at least $530 per information form with no maximum. So if you intentionally are disregarding and you're trying to dodge this reporting requirement, the penalties do get very, very stiff. Really want to make sure you get these done. Just get them done quickly, be done with them, don't worry about it. So let's talk about due dates for a second. So these are the due dates from last year. And this is the due dates they've been for a long time. If all has been the last day of January, you need to have this form sent to recipients. Last year, January 31st was a Sunday, so they sent the deadline to February 1st. If you're mailing your forms into the IRS, you need to have them mailed by the end of February. Last year was a leap year, so it went to February 29th. Usually it's February 28th. And if you're electronically filing to the IRS, you need to have the forms sent to them by March 31st. These are due dates that have pretty much been in place forever. However, this year they did make a change. For any W-2 or a 1099 miscellaneous with information in Box 7, and we'll show you about Box 7 in just a second, the deadlines did change. It still needs to be postmarked to your recipients by January 31st. However, if you're mailing it into the IRS, it also needs to be postmarked to the IRS by January 31st. And finally, if you're electronically filing to the IRS, it also needs to be filed by January 31st. So if you have information in Box 7 on your 1099 miscellaneouses, you do need to make sure that this full process, both postmarked out to the recipients and sent to the IRS, is completed by January 31st. State deadlines do vary. However, if you're already doing the recipients and you're doing the IRS, I would highly suggest you just complete your filing to the state and be done with it. One quick note on electronic filing to the IRS and the SSA, the threshold is 250. If you are filing more than 250 1099s, you do need to electronically file to the IRS. So I'm really quick going to toss up a picture of the 1099 miscellaneous form. And as you can see, I've highlighted Box 7, and this is the non-employee compensation box. A couple other common ones you'll see are boxes 3 and 7. Those are the most common ones we see filled out on the 1099 miscellaneous. As you can all see over here, there is information for your name, the payer, and also information for the recipient. That would be your vendor. Really want to talk just for a second why the IRS moved their deadlines. And ultimately, what they were seeing is a lot of fraud. People would go in and file fraudulent tax returns that the rest of us do by April 15th. People would go in and file those fraudulent tax returns very early before the IRS got their copy of the forms. And then they would get a huge refund. The IRS would write them a huge check, and then they would take their money and run. So in order to combat that, the IRS wanted their information sooner, so that way when they get a fraudulent return back, they can say, yeah, we don't have a 1099 miscellaneous that accounts for that information. We're not going to send you a refund. It's a way to sniff out some of those fraudulent returns a little bit quicker. So I mentioned before that Nelco does provide forms that are compatible with Design Manager and IRS compliant. And so I wanted to really quick put out Nelco's number. When you're getting ready to file your 1099 forms, go ahead and give us a call or go out to our website, and you can order compatible 1099 forms. There's a lot of advantages to doing the 1099 miscellaneous filing by yourself. Biggest one is that you'll save money. We hear a lot of people of outsourcing these to accountants, and some of the charges that we've seen that accountants charge to complete 1099 filings are really, really ridiculous. As you can see, this is not a really complicated form. You have your name, you have your information right here, you have your recipient's information right here, and you have some data. All this data is available in your Design Manager software. Brad is going to go over that here in just 1 second. You can do this yourself, and we highly encourage you guys to give it a shot this year and go ahead and get your 1099s done as opposed to putting them through an accountant. Again, if you go out to designmanager.nelcosolutions.com, it'll look like this. You can come down here, click on 1099 forms, and you can choose the 1099 copies that you need. There's a set right here that has all the different copies for it. There's envelopes that make it a breeze. All you have to do is print it out, stuff it into the envelope, and you're good to go. Again, if you'd like to call us and order, here's the phone number right here. You can also live chat. Or if you want a rep to call you, go ahead and fill out this Get More Information from Nelco tool right here and click Submit. At that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Brad Martin and let him go ahead and walk you through Design Manager. Brad?
Thanks, Jason. That was a great discussion on 1099s, and we really appreciate you taking your time for our Design Manager users today to go over that. And as Jason said, the 1099 process really is very simple. So, as Jason said, my name's Brad, and I'm going to show you how to work your Design Manager to properly configure it, to have your vendors ready for 1099s, and actually generate the forms themselves. So what's the overall process of 1099s? Well, procedurally, it's quite simple. Essentially, in a general order, you're going to need to determine what vendors require a 1099, ensure those vendors have provided you with a Form W-9 or at least provided you with the appropriate information to file the 1099, and then process the 1099s themselves, along with another form known as a 1096. Again, really not all that difficult. So the first question is, who needs a 1099? Well, the easiest manner to determine what vendor would require a 1099 is to use a few simple reports in Design Manager, starting with a vendor history report. This report is quite simple, and it's going to show the total purchases, including vendor deposits, for all vendors in the current and prior 2 years. To get to the report, in Design Manager Cloud, go to your Reports button, go under Accounts Payable Reports, and you can see vendor history about 2/3 of the way down. Now, as many of you who have joined us in the past know, once I find a report that I find particularly useful, I simply highlight it on my reports tree, click the Add to Favorites button, and now I have it saved on my Favorites menu so I can access it easily in the future. For our professional users, same general principle. Simply go to your Accounting tab, AP or Accounts Payable Reports, and we'll see the vendor history again in the same position, and I also have it attached to my favorites in that version as well. So let's go ahead and print out the report and see what information it provides us. So as I said, very simply, we're going to have a list of all of our active vendors. It's going to show all of the activity in the current year and in the prior years as well, along with the total. Now, since it's already 2017, the current year, of course, would be 0 as I have no activity yet. So we're focusing really on the prior year, or in our case, 2016. So what information am I going to use to determine whether or not the vendor needs a 1099? Well, it's twofold. One, they have to meet or exceed that $600 minimum of payments made within the year. And secondly, that, as Jason discussed, they're an appropriate vendor. So looking at our list here, I can easily exclude certain vendors that we've purchased merchandise or furniture from, such as America's Mattress, Bungalow 5, Century Furniture, etc. I would be focusing on vendors that have provided us various services or who are our sole proprietorship or not incorporated. Like my ABC Computer Supply Company is a sole proprietor, so since they're over $9.95, I'm going to be requiring to present them with a 1099. Madison Ashford is a designer that assists the firm on a lot of work that we pay independently, who's not an employee, and she certainly exceeds that $600 minimum as well. Great Wolf Contracting and Superior Lighting are both contractors that we use, so they're going to have 1099s. My attorney, Thomas S. Peterson, would also be required to have a 1099 as well. So we're looking at the type of vendor that we're dealing with and how much activity that we have spent with them. So this is a very good place to start. Now, for our professional users, the vendor history report in this platform has even more features to make the 1099 review even easier. So if we run the report here, I have a few additional options, as you can see. One, it allows me to specify the current year. It's defaulting to 2017 as that is the current year, but since I want to focus on my last year's activity, I would change that to 2016. I can also input a minimum amount. Since I'm concerned about 1099s right now, that magic number is 600. I have a subtotal by type option, which is defaulted to yes. What this will do is when the report is run, it's going to show my vendors grouped by their type, contractor, fabric, furniture, etc. So I can easily discard vendors that have no need for a 1099, like my furniture providers or fabric providers. I can show the contact details if I wanted to have the vendor's phone number and a person to contact. That would print on the report if necessary. And I have the option to include it inactive, which is also defaulted to yes, which is how I want to run the report. Even though I may have the vendor inactive as of right now, if I did have activity and payments for that vendor in 2016, I want to see them on the vendor history report for my review. And if we run it, we can see here I am grouping all of my vendors by their by their type, so I can focus on my contractors for Great Wolf and Superior Lighting. I can ignore my furniture, I can ignore my fabric vendors, and I can focus on some of my operating, such as my ABC Computer Supply, my real estate company that rents me the office building, and my professional services, again, Madison Ashford, who works for us as an outside designer, and my attorney. So the professional platform makes the process even easier, as it really allows you to filter out some of the vendors that you don't even need to concern yourself with. Okay, so now let's take a look at the next report. If we have issued 1099s in the past, or we've already configured our appropriate vendors for 1099 processing, which I'll get into in a moment, we can cross-check our vendor history against all the vendors that we currently have a 1099 scheduled to be generated for by running the first of our 1099 reports, which is what we call the 1099 Miscellaneous Summary, which again is under our Accounts Payable folder and listed right up top under 1099s, and I've attached it to my favorites as well. So if we run our 1099 report, we have a few options right off the bat. It's going to default to the prior year, conveniently, since I'm running my, it's currently 2017, the 1099 is always focusing on the year prior, it's going to show 2016 for us. It's going to default to the current federal minimum, which is $600. I have my format selections, and the first one is the one I just mentioned, the 1099 Miscellaneous Summary. And we'll get into some of the other ones momentarily. Let's go ahead and print that, and we'll take a look at what we can see. Make this a little bit bigger. There we go. So we have our 1099 Miscellaneous Summary report. We have the year for which we're running it, the minimum amount. And here we can see some of our vendors. We already have our Great Wolf Contracting, Tom Peterson is our attorney. We have our real estate group and our Superior Lighting. We can also see their EIN numbers, or it might be a social security number if it's a sole individual who does not have an employer identification number. That's a very important piece of information, by the way, which is one reason why it's always very good suggestion, if not required, to send such vendors that you believe you'll be sending a 1099. You want to send them what is known as a W-9 form, which looks approximately like this. And this is simply your company requesting the identification number and certification of the individual who's performing the services for you. That's going to force them to give you their EIN or social security number, and you'll have everything on record. Once that information is filled out, you get it into your design manager, which we'll see in a second how to do so, and you're really good to go. Now remember, it's your responsibility to have those 1099s filed, as Jason said before, so you really want to force your vendors to fill out those W-9s and provide you with the appropriate information so you can file correctly. You don't want to have to amend your 1099s, as Jason said. That can get expensive very quickly. And we see the payee information for the address and the total amounts as well. So a very simple document. There's also a detailed version of the same report, back to our 1099s, and we can see the 1099 Miscellaneous Detail. This shows the exact same information, but it shows all of the transactions that comprise the totals. So if you want to see where you're getting your $22,600 for Superior Lighting, you can see how it's generated on the detail version. So just a little bit more information than the summary format. But if we're looking at our summary 1099 miscellaneous, I can already tell that I'm missing some vendors. I imagine that I would be seeing my ABC Computer Supply Company and also Madison Ashford. They're not appearing on our report. So that's where my red flags start going off. Why are these vendors not appearing on my 1099 summary? Well, the very first reaction would be perhaps they're not yet configured for 1099 processing, or I haven't gone through that exercise at all yet. Here's how to do so. You indicate a vendor is going to require 1099 on the vendor window itself, which in Design Manager Cloud, you go to your glossaries, vendors and payees. Let's take Madison Ashford as an example. Edit. And in the bottom right quadrant, we can see a menu for 1099. Currently, Madison is set for none. Hence, she's not going to appear on our 1099 summary, forms, or the forms themselves. If we drop that menu down, we can see all of the various selections. As Jason said in his presentation, by far the most common would be the non-employee compensation. But there are also selections for rents, royalties, attorney, other income, and the INT. The INT is very scarcely used. That would be a situation where the company has paid interest to an individual on a loan or something along those lines, which is very uncommon. But if that is the case of your company, you can select that appropriately and then file what they call the 1099 INT forms, again, as Jason mentioned briefly. So, also, besides the fact that the 1099 menu designates the vendor for requiring a 1099 at all, it also will appropriately show the payee total in the appropriate box on the form itself, as we'll see when we get to that point. So for Madison Ashford, she would be non-employee compensation, and we do have her Social Security number in this case. So now we're ready to go. We click OK to save our changes, and we reprint our 1099 summary. Voila, now we can see Madison Ashford being shown here as well. So, first step, all of your necessary vendors, which you can get a very good handle on by running the vendor history report, need to be configured on the vendor glossary, the vendor window itself, simply by selecting the appropriate 1099 on the 1099 menu and entering in either the EIN or Social Security number as well. For our professional users, very similar. You would go under your accounting tab, vendors and payees, go down to the vendor in question, and again, simply select the appropriate 1099 designation, and we're good to go. Well, that takes care of Madison Ashford, but why isn't our ABC computer company appearing? Well, we saw that they had over $900, $999 in fact. So if we verify in our vendor glossary that they're configured properly by simply editing, yep, 1099 miscellaneous non-employee compensation. Everything looks properly configured here. One caveat, the vendor history report, as design managers in an accrual-based accounting system, is concerned with the vendor invoices and vendor deposits themselves. It doesn't really care about the payments, which is an exact different viewpoint of the 1099. The 1099 only cares about payments. So if I have an invoice that I may have entered for ABC Computer Supply that I've put into the software but not yet written a check for or otherwise indicated payment, it would show on our vendor history report and not show on our 1099. To verify that, I can look under my checking window, my Pay Bills Print Checks tab, and as I suspected, I have an entry for my support contract that I just put in at the end of the year that I have not yet written a check for. So, this is going to have ABC Computer Supply Company appear on the vendor history report, right there and yet not appear on our 1099 report. I can also run our aged accounts payable report by going to reports, under accounts payable, aged accounts payable, and this is going to be a listing of all of the bills I have unpaid at the end of 2016. So we'll drop our menu back to that month, and there I can see my computer supply company again, an unpaid bill. So technically they do not require a 1099. So those are the other reasons, another reason why you may have a vendor showing on your vendor history but not on the 1099 report. So we don't owe ABC a 1099 for that year. Okay, so configuring the vendors for 1099s, very, very simple, as we just saw. Really just edit them, select the appropriate 1099 format on the 1099 menu on the vendor window, enter in the Social Security number or EIN, and we're good to go. So now we're really ready to generate the 1099s themselves. But as I mentioned before, we are going to have another form called the 1096, which really identifies our company and acts almost as a cover letter or a cover page for the 1099s. So let's take a peek at that first. All of that is back on our 1099s, and if we want to do our 1096 first, simply select our format, drop it down to 1096 miscellaneous form, and now the 1096 contact name comes into play as well. This is going to print on the document itself, indicating who at our company should be contacted about any questions with the 1099s. And I'll go ahead and put myself in that position. And if we click OK, there it is. Looks like a bunch of information on a blank piece of paper. But that would fill in to our 1096 exactly. So if we look back at our document in Design Manager, we're going to see all of our company information in the top left, which we do. We'll see the person to contact, email address, telephone and fax numbers, myself, email, telephone and fax, our EIN number, and then the total number of forms and the total amount of the 1099s as well, which are also displayed. And lastly, we're going to see what type of 1099 we're inputting with the checkbox, and that's going to be the 1099 miscellaneous as indicated by the X right there. So all we'd have to do is have our Nelco 1096 form in our printer and simply print directly onto the document, and we're ready to go. Just for our information, our company information comes from our company information window, accessed by File, Company Settings, and we can see there's our company name, our address, city, state, and zip. Our phone, fax, and email are also displayed, as is our tax ID, while Design Manager calculates the total of forms being sent on 1099s and the total amount. So now our 1096 form is already finished. Next, all we have to do is print the 1099 forms themselves. Again, we're going to purchase these from Nelco, and they'll look approximately like this. This is how Design Manager will end up printing on this sheet themselves. Let's take a peek. Back to our 1099s, and now we'll drop down our format once again to the 1099 forms. Again, if you do have a situation where you have an interest 1099, you can do that as well, which are at the bottom. So we'll get ready for our 1099 miscellaneous forms. We don't need anything in the contact name, and we click OK. And now Design Manager is crafting the report to be printed directly on the Nelco 1099 form. And we can see our company information in the top left, right there. as the payer's name and address. We have our EIN and the vendor's Social Security or EIN, which are right here and here respectively. All of the vendor's information, name, address, etc., and the total amount. Notice for Madison Ashford, it's approximately towards the bottom of the form, which would drop it right into the box 7 for non-employee compensation. But for some of our other vendors, Great Wolf Contracting would be the same. But our attorney, Tom Peterson, his 825 is going to drop down into gross proceeds paid to attorney, box 14. And even our real estate group that rents us our building would be up in box 1 for rents. So by selecting the appropriate type of 1099 on our vendor window, Design Manager will move that amount into the appropriate area. So all we have to do now is simply print the forms out themselves onto our Nelco forms, and we're good to go. And just like that, we're finished with our 1099s. All we have to do now is mail a copy off to the vendor and to the IRS with our 1096 and make sure that those are postmarked by January 31st, and we're really ready to go. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lindsay to conclude our presentation today.
Thank you so much, Brad, and thank you so much to Jason. That was a lot of information on 1099s to take in all at once. So, of course, we will be posting this webinar out on our YouTube page so you can reference it as needed. Special thanks to Jason for joining us from Nelco today and giving us his time today, so we really appreciate that. And as always, thank you to Brad for demonstrating the Design Manager software. We really hope that you enjoyed the webinar, and if you have any outstanding questions on 1099s or would like to place an order, just feel free to find us at sales@designmanager.com, and we can certainly get you on your way. So, Happy New Year to everyone. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.